Dr. Fetcher, can you please proceed with this evening's orientation?
Yes, Dr. Murray. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Phil Solomon, Regional Manager at ICS, to provide an orientation on the future facilities planning.
Thank you for having us back. Phil Solomon from ICS Consulting. I have with me David Schrader from Schrader Group Architects. We have a brief agenda tonight. It's really kind of a review, but a consolidated view, if you will. Part of this was to talk a little bit about the process used to size the middle school, as well as put together the costs. We're going to do a little bit of educational program summary, which really helps drive that, and Mr. Schrader is going to talk about that a little bit. Talk a little bit about the construction costs and the budgeting methodology, as well as kind of the consequences of a failed referendum. So we were asked to put together kind of an estimate of what we would call an emergency prevention program. So we're going to go through that and then field any questions and answers. So there's been a few questions about how was this sized? There's not a design done yet. So how did we come about sizing this building? So we have kind of an infographic here. So the first thing is a demographic study. So a demographer puts together the enrollment projection for the district, for the middle school, and how many students you're going to have in the longer term. And that, in this case, it's 2,200 students. Then the district has an educational program that it wants to run for those middle school. That's the middle school teaming model, and that's a modern way of educating middle school students. We then have Mr. Schrader's group put together square footage for that educational model. So we kind of figure out what is the size of the building to run that educational program. We then develop a cost around that square footage. So that's just to build the building. Then we have to add what's called the indirect costs. That's all the other things that you need to do to build a building in the location with the particulars of Abington Middle School. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David just to speak a little bit about the programming to square footage process.
Okay, thank you, Phil, and good evening, everybody. So what you're seeing here is a summary cover page that is a cover of about 8 different pages or 10 different pages of educational programming. Several years ago, we sat down with your secondary middle school program staff, actually it was the administration in general, and went through what would support students for the next generation of learning, thinking the whole time about flexibility for the future as well. And the intent as we went through this was to understand total program needs. We fashioned this by doing all of the spaces that you have in the proposed program, which supported every kind of educational goal that the middle school program had. And that turns into what you see up at the number 238,000 square feet. That's the net square footage of need. And the way we look at net square footage is the wall to the wall to the wall to the wall. But every time that you do that, you must have circulation space to get to that. You need to have room for all of your building systems and so on. And so we create what is called a multiplier, or a gross multiplier, that brings us to a total square footage of a facility. And this has become very accurate over time as we've worked through these processes. That number on the right is that multiple, that's a gross square footage of 345,000 square feet. And we worked through the different areas for comparison, and that's what you're seeing down below: the core student spaces, media resource, performing arts, fitness and wellness, and you can anticipate what each of those includes. And what we're trying to get to is some total square footage that we can put on a site to test fit. That's really what we were trying to do at this point in time. And with that, then, Phil's team, as he mentioned, worked through a cost estimating process. So a check for us is this item C, where under that number 2, those of you that can see that, it says 157 square feet per student. So slide yourself to the right on the screen here. In this case, we're looking at a capacity of 2,200 students for this facility, total gross square footage of 345,000 square feet. Therefore, the total gross square footage per student is 157 square feet per student. And so the test for this is, what is an average square footage per student in the region? So the second or third to last line says typical middle school, 150 square feet to 200 square feet per student. Now that's actually kind of a regional number. The interesting thing about that number is that 200 square feet per student is for a smaller school. If you can imagine trying to net out a gymnasium, the dining spaces, performing arts spaces, all of those things for a smaller school, they still end up being fairly similar in size to those for a larger school. So your gross square footage gets reduced as the buildings get a little bit larger, and thus that 150 square feet per student. So you can see that that 157 square feet per student is a pretty good number in the range of total square footages. So that was test number one, and I think we're going to talk about test two in a second.
Yes. So then from the square footage that was developed, we're looking at costs. And what you're seeing here is you've seen kind of a pretty steep escalation in costs. Pre-COVID, this is 2018, and these orange bars reflect renovation additions, and the blue bars reflect new construction. These are all school buildings in Southeast PA. So this is really what you would compare against. So you can see as 2018, 2019, 2021, these are rising. All of these buildings here are 2024. So now we're in 2025, but you can see that the range in 2024 was about 460 to 500. In 2025, we're using around 500 as the correct number for dollars per square foot of a building. Now that's just the building. Then you have to build it, so you need all these other indirect costs. And we're going to talk about those as we break this out a little bit further. But just keep in mind that, you know, we're kind of using these actual bid data from areas from buildings in our region to kind of drive this cost estimating. David, you want to talk a little bit about this picture? I know that there's a lot that has been said about this conceptual picture, but could you just give an idea of why we did that?
Yeah, sure. So now you've got a total square footage for a building that will support the program that you need, and the goal always is to test fit that square footage on a site. The square footage doesn't mean anything in the image. What it's trying to do is trying to get you that square footage fit within all of the setback lines and all of the zoning restrictions on the sites. And I say sites because in this case, you actually have several parcels that make up your entire piece of property. And so the orange merely demonstrates square footage on the site for a building, and then the attempt to try to separate car and bus traffic on the site to accommodate that as you begin to plan. And then, of course, trying to get all of the playing fields on that you need to have on the site as well. So the end result as we go through this process will be a true design process where we try to figure out exactly what it is that Abington School District wants for a middle school, and it will turn into a site design. All that's trying to do is to fit the square footage on the site. Two wings mean nothing. All it means is a total square footage and several stories to fit most of the zoning restrictions. So as your project evolves, when the project evolves, you'll see this change quite a bit. Our goal is to try to show that the area in pink, that is the existing middle school, if you're seeing pink, some people might see purple, versus that orange area allows us to move the students once the new building is built into that space, take the old building down, and resume all of the site construction that surrounds that building. That's all that's doing. At some point, that will change.
Great, thank you. Just giving a little context to some of these numbers. Now, when we work through the estimate, I'll just point to different things. So remember David was talking about 345,000 square feet. So that's the number we're using. When you look at mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and general trade costs, this equates to about $147 million. There is site work for this consolidated lot, and it's going to be a little more than if it was just a plain lot, because this site it's older. It was built quite a while ago, did not have as many stormwater and erosion control requirements at the time. We'll have to bring the entire site up to current code when this building is built. Again, there's a demolition budget as well. The building's old and cement, it's sizable to get rid of that building. Now, if we were to build that building right now, as it is, it would be $513 per square foot. So that's the comparison that you would have to kind of other projects. So I've heard some comparisons out there. So that would be more of an apples to apples comparison. However, we're building this on an active site and right here in the middle of the existing middle school and the existing high school. So there is going to be some temporary construction and roads and all those kind of things to keep the site operational during construction. So you had to account for that. In addition, where this is going, there is an existing, these tennis courts are right under here, and there's a track. So we're going to have to relocate that as well. So you add that to the cost. We're also not building it today, so there's a significant amount of construction cost escalation built into this. Now, we have it at 4.5% per year, and the way that this is typically done is to the midpoint of construction. So just to give you an idea, you know, that is about 12.8% of the total budget. Now, we hope that inflation is not going to run at 4.5% per year, but that's not a strategy. You have to plan for what you see. So that's what it's planned for right now. You then also have contingencies and design and construction contingencies, and then there are all the professional services, owner costs, permits, commissioning, everything you need to make a building work. So when you put all that together, it's $285 million for this 345,000 square foot building in this location. Another way to look at this is kind of, I put it in a pie chart just so you can see it differently. Some people are visual learners or what have you. You can see this 176 million, that's the $513 per square foot. That comprises a majority of the cost, but then you have the movement of the fields, you have the contingencies and escalation. Again, hopefully it's not as steep as it has been, and that can come down. The district would have less. And then you have all the professional services, permits, furniture, fixtures, equipment, etc. Now to what would happen if the referendum failed. So as many of you know, the middle school is a lot of the systems are well past their useful life. And it's really time to start investing. And you have a good opportunity here to invest in a new building, or you can invest in the existing building. Just the basic HVAC renovation in this building is going to trigger a lot of code upgrades because it's going to be invasive. So that will be some of the HVAC and the return air codes, et cetera. A lot of the ADA deficiencies we could probably defer if we did this targeted renovation. So we're not assuming we're going to bring it all up to code, and that's all going to be that will all be subject to the authority having jurisdiction, whether that's possible or not. But we've modeled it that we don't have to bring the whole thing up to code. This process, the building would look exactly like it looks today. So you're really not modifying that much except the systems behind the walls. So think of your infrastructure systems like mechanical, electrical, plumbing. There really wouldn't be any educational improvements because the building's going to look substantially like it does. When you do the math on that, I call this emergency prevention because a lot of these systems are kind of at the failure area of their useful life. So you want to prevent emergencies. But when you do the budget on that, it's about $105 million. So when you do a little bit of math on that, you would probably borrow in a 20-year bond because you're not building a whole new building, you're just doing systems. So 20 years would be reasonable. And current interest rates from the district, that would equate to about $8.3 million per year in budgetary impact. And without a referendum, that would most likely have to come from your general fund somewhere. We break this down into kind of the system. So we're not really doing anything elaborate here. You're talking about HVAC, electrical systems that are original to the building that need to be replaced, plumbing systems, many of them are original to the building, and anything prior to 1996. Areas of the building that don't have sprinkler systems, roofing, building envelope, which is like windows and door replacements, masonry repairs, and not really many interior surfaces, only things that would be touched in the process of doing the MEP work. You'd have minimal accessibility and safety upgrades. You would have to make sure that the elevator was operational and a couple other things, handrails, entrance ramps, et cetera. You would have to get rid of any concealed hazardous material, and essentially that is the meat of the project. Now, when you do this, there's also some exterior work, asphalt, concrete that is crumbling, some of the retaining walls, stairs, all of that stuff. Now, when you do this project, it is still of scale. You don't have swing space in the building, so you would still need a modular series of classrooms to generate the swing space to be able to do the project. In addition, you couldn't start this project today. It still needs to be designed. So you have escalation, so you have construction cost escalation. You would again have design contingency because in a renovation project, you're much more likely to find things that you did not anticipate, especially in a building of this age. And then you would have construction contingency and then your professional services. So, at the minimum end, it's about $105 million. Again, there might be some things that you uncover as you tear this building apart that would inch that up as well. When you put that into the same pie chart, you can just kind of see how that breaks out. So then I was asked to do just a summary slide. So, if you had a failed referendum and you had to start investing in the building today, you could do this emergency prevention that I just went through, and that would be about an $8.3 million budgetary impact per year, modeled at about 20 years right now. Now, if you remember when we were looking at all options, there was an option, I forget 1 or 1A, to do a full renovation of this building, and that would kind of touch everything. But that number was $206 million. That would likely double the impact on your general fund. There is always the kind of run to failure, which is react when things break. Unfortunately, when you do that, they will tend to cost more when you aggregate it all, because when you do something in an emergency situation, it is typically going to cost more. You're going to have to expedite parts. You're going to be stuck with a like-for-like replacement. You don't have an opportunity to really update the system. You're just going to be in that repair, replace mode. Problem with that is it's going to be more disruptive because you can't predict when things are going to fail. Failure is inherently unpredictable, and it won't be easy to budget for because, again, things fail when they do. And sometimes they fail in bunches and sometimes it's pieces. So those were the three things. I'm sure there are other scenarios that you could come up with, but those were the three most likely scenarios that we were able to come up with. With that, we're happy to field questions.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The slide that we just looked at, I think it was slide number 9, you mentioned modular cost. Was that incorporated in the 100, the overall cost, or no? Any modular units?
Yes, the modulars are in the $105 million cost. That is this line item right here.
Okay,
That's modeled at about half of one of your grades. So half of grade 6, 7, or 8.
okay, and then also emergency and prevention, you mentioned 8.3 million a year for a 20-year bond. So 8.3 million a year for
20 years. So
Okay,
that is just modeling the $105 million at current interest rates. I spoke with Mr. Leonetti. You've done some recent borrowing, so a 5% interest rate was used. 20 years was chosen because when you're doing a project of this magnitude on just systems, not the whole building, that seems to be an appropriate amount of time to borrow against.
Thank you.
So that's paying back that 20-year bond.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question regarding the time frame that would be predicted to finish your warm, safe, and dry approach to needs at the middle school.
Yeah, so you would still have about a 12 to 18 month design and permitting process, and then you still have a 3 to 4 year construction cycle. So don't have all that nailed down exactly, but somewhere in that range would be an expected time to complete.
So, and that would be full year, like
Yes.
12 months of 3 to 4 years of active
All through school,
repairs.
everything. That's why the modulars need to be there. There's no way to break this up into just summer only work. You would certainly have to have a modular farm, and you'd have to be shifting kids throughout those modular classrooms as you worked your way through segments of the building.
Okay. And it would be predicted that at any given time, half of the student population would be utilizing modulars? I know you said
Half of a grade
half of a grade at any given time
at
through
any
that.
given time, correct.
Okay.
So they would be filtering through the modulars. That is
And
the,
where would the modulars be?
we haven't designed out where the
Okay.
modulars would go. We only did this as a first pass of
Right.
what we think the investment would be. We would still have to model out kind of where and how things would circulate, et cetera. Typically, you're going to put modulars in parking areas because you already have impervious surface. It's a good spot to put them.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question about the design. If you can go back to the first slide. And this is if the, I'm sorry, the second slide. Third. Keep going. That one. Yeah, there we go.
The graphic.
The graphic. Thank you. This question is not about if the referendum does not pass. This question is if it does pass. Some community members were concerned about not being able to see something more concrete before they made their vote. I just wanted to know if you can speak towards how much does the design cost, because a big part of this was making sure that we were totally transparent and making this a community decision. And if we had invested the money for design, then that's not as transparent to me. That seems as though the board has already made a decision. So I just wanted to speak to how much does it cost for the design work, the blueprints, in order to present something to the public?
Yeah, to get to a presentable schematic that's reflective of what you would build, it would be $2 to $3 million easily.
Okay.
And that would depend on how far you want to bring that design before you show it to the public, because as you evolve it, it is going to change a little bit. So it's a little bit, if you do too little and it looks one way and then you show everybody and then it ends up looking differently for a variety of reasons. I mean, you also are working through a land development process. They might force some changes that we're not aware of yet. So the building configuration could change a little bit as you work your way through that. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, just one of the advantages you have today is people no longer start with images like this. You're actually building a model from the start. So it's within the first 10% of the total fee that you actually have something that you can walk through and understand what it looks like. So I agree with Phil that there's a time frame where there is some adjustment, but once you get to a certain point, it's not being adjusted greatly. It's something that you would know exactly what you're looking at. And if you decide that you want something different, you change it as part of that. It's just part of the iterative process.
Okay.
But just to follow on to that, so for states where referendum is the way that they do construction, this is the best practice. You don't invest a bunch of money up front. You go get the funding first by using the methodology that we used, sizing, program, and then you develop the program after that. And the design comes after the voters have determined whether they would support or not. And there's a variety of reasons, because in other states, a lot of times a school district will go to referendum several times before they have the right, approach dialed in. So if you had to pay millions of dollars every time, you'd end up wasting quite a bit of money. So this is a best practice from referendum states to do it this way.
Thank you for that.
Other questions? Ms. Wu? No? I have just a small question about the square footage per student that we currently have in the middle school versus what we will have, which is still on the low end for middle schools in the county. And if I understood you correctly, that was partly because we are a bigger building.
Yeah, you're
Right.
definitely getting economies of scale.
Okay.
Size of the building that you're in.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
cafeteria, gym, all of that is distributed among a lot more students than, say, 1,000 student middle school.
right.
Whereas David was saying those common spaces they're not double that. There are some percentage larger
Right.
than student middle school.
Right. But I guess the the point I was trying to get at is that should the referendum pass and we do the new middle school, students will have 20 square feet more of elbow room, which is a way of saying that they're pretty cramped right now, right? That they are under space by 20 square foot per student.
That's certainly one way to look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, compared to the typicals. And the typicals are tricky, but that is, they're rules of thumb for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
I have a question. For the renovations, when you have the systems, electrical, plumbing, and I think it was something else there.
Mechanical.
Okay. Would that include the I think it's called pre-code requirements? You used that language a while back. Would that satisfy the pre-code
So
requirements?
it would satisfy, anything that will touch will have to be to current code. But there is a lot of existing things that are not up to current ADA code, for example, some of your stairwells, things that we would not be touching. We would work with the authority having jurisdiction to ensure that we could leave those as is. They are grandfathered into whatever code they were built under. So the number would be much larger if we did have to bring everything up to current code. The 105 million is just to do HVAC, some of the old mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the fire systems, roof systems, what we would consider kind of the warm, safe, dry components of the building, just to make sure that you don't have failures and leaks and all those kind of things that would interrupt education.
Thank you.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry.
It's okay.
So in this scenario, then, we would be unlikely to have a middle school that would be ADA compliant.
It would not. That is not what is modeled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that
Would
clarification.
not be that. In addition, this is really just the systems behind the walls. That would not prevent you from having other money you'd have to invest for all the other systems. You know, if you remember, there was a renovation number I flashed up about $400 and some per square foot. This is less than 200. So you can imagine there's all those other systems in the building, you know, flooring, ceiling, all the things that you use that would still be well beyond their useful life, and you would just be repairing as they broke, essentially.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
That was actually my question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great minds.
Yep.
And just to piggyback off of that, I do want to remind my colleagues and the community that that the ADA compliance is very important, even financially. We just approved a bid, or did we approve the contract for a $300,000 lift chair
Purchase.
purchase?
It was a purchase.
Right? Was that for the middle school?
Yes.
Yeah. So those purchases add up over time. And our students who are confined to a wheelchair or have any other restriction should not impede their access to a full building. If a STEM lab is on the 3rd floor and a student can't get there, that's not okay. So inclusion cost, and it is worth every penny.
Yeah, we were tasked with what's the minimum investment you could put into the building to kind of keep it operational. So that, you know, maybe if you wanted us to look at ADA, we would have to fix a lot of the ADA issues in the building. You really do have to tear the building apart. It's not an easy building to fix, just when it was built and what the codes were at the time. We can certainly come up with that number if that's something you'd like us to do, though.
It's important. Whether you had an injury and you're temporarily on crutches or in a wheelchair, or if that is your way of life, it is important that our students and our faculty has access to a full building, and that we have an inclusive mindset when we build.
Mrs. Brown, would you like to ask for the cost of bringing the building up into ADA compliance?
Herein lies the problem. You can get the numbers for us to bring it up to ADA compliance. our budget does not allow for us to cover it. So if the referendum does not pass, whether we have the numbers or not, there's nowhere else to get that money from based on what I'm hearing. So no, I'm not inclined to ask for that to happen because I'm asking for something that I know we can't do. What I am asking for is for my community members to see that it's more than having a pretty building. This is, it affects our educational programming. It affects access for all students, and that collectively, we can fund one of the most important things that we have in our community, and that is education. So that is what I'm asking for. So no, I'm not asking for how much would it cost because I know we don't have it. Okay. I'm asking for people to vote yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you for clarifying that.
I cringe at the slide, right? The slides referencing a failed referendum because a failed referendum means year after year of budget impact. To Ms. Brown's point, that would be hard to stomach. That would be hard to absorb as a district, and it means we have to start asking questions about what do we go without, and sometimes that's an important question to have, and those are important conversations to have. And all of us on the dais, we're having that conversation, but we shouldn't have to say we're going to go without ADA compliance. We shouldn't say we're going to go without a speedy addressing or as quick as possible addressing of systems that are at the end of their useful life. And, just doing the bare minimum and then still knowing that other disruptions are going to occur, other failures are going to occur. And we're kicking the can down the road when, as a community, we can make this happen. As a community, we absolutely can make this happen.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for that.
Can I add just a couple of things? Some other concerns when I look at this plan, I think about having all of our students and teachers in a building while this level of construction is happening. That in itself gives me pause, let alone for it to happen for 4 continuous years. So we'd have students that go through the building and have this level of construction happening the entire time without getting the outcomes that are associated with it that would be more beneficial to the community. Something to consider. And the other thing I was thinking about when we talk about general funds and utilizing a large chunk to fund this, which Mrs. Brown explained that, we wouldn't have access to more funds. I also think of our other district buildings and what do we do in the case that we have an emergency that presents over that 4 to 5 year period, or actually the 20-year period where we're now adding an additional cost. Where do we find that money to address contingencies that present in our other buildings? So I appreciate having this presentation tonight to put a place of reference, but again, I see that it just exemplifies the importance and the implications of a failed referendum, and really just reinforces the importance of it passing for our community and residents.
Thank you.
Just go ahead. I'm sorry. No, that's fine. And just forgive me if I'm not very eloquent tonight. I've been up since 5 a.m. But coming back to what Ms. Brown and Mr. Muhammad were saying, going ahead and continuing to put money into a building that not all students can access. And we need to think about whether or not that's something that we can really live with. If we are going to go ahead and continue to invest in a building in a school building that we're going to go ahead and send all of our children to without adequate access for all of those students.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. I have one final question. Given the age of the building, there is certainly asbestos in there. And that concerns me given the sort of the movement of students, right? So we're rotating certain numbers of students out of the building while work is being done, but that means that most students would be in the building. I know there are safety procedures for cordoning off spaces so that asbestos does not become airborne. But that doesn't make me feel comfortable because no system is perfect. And, in addition to the significant budget impact, the inability to bring the building up to ADA compliance, the fact that we're going to have hard conversations about cuts to programs in order to fund this Band-Aid, essentially, and safety risks to kids who are going to be in the building. I mean, we keep coming back to the same answer. The referendum has to pass. But thank you very much for your presentation, gentlemen, and for laying the facts out before the community.
Thank you.